organization's assets enable it to research, manufacture, and build products and solutions, which in turn serve customers' needs and generate revenue for the enterprise. As these corporate assets continue to become more complex, diverse, and expensive, the accurate and timely tracking of such assets has become all the more critical. Asset tracking mechanisms have become increasingly interlaced with technologies such as IoT, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, empowering enterprises of all sizes and sectors to tap into actionable business insights. So how can business leaders better capitalize on their asset tracking methodologies to maximize asset throughput? To shed more light on the subject, I'm joined by founder and CEO of AssetCues, Falgun Shah. And with that, I welcome you to our special feature, Evolution and Future of Asset Tracking. Sir, AssetCues has come to be known as an enterprise-grade asset tracking solutions provider. But for the sake of the benefit of our viewers, what are these assets and why is it critical that they be tracked in the first place?
Every enterprise invests in a wide variety of assets, and these assets include, say, machine, equipments, tools, IT assets, which are, your computers, servers,
Sure.
laptops. What happens is that depending on the industry that enterprise operates in, the mix of these assets changes. So if it's a manufacturing company, they will have more of machines and tools, whereas if it's an IT company, they'll have more of laptops and computers, technology
Absolutely.
assets. If it's a construction company, they'll have more of construction equipment. So if you look at the mix of assets for every enterprise, you will realize that assets are at the core of revenue generation for any entity. The operational effectiveness of the company depends on how well they manage and track their assets, right? So if they can improve the performance and utilization of their assets, they can improve operationally as well. So it's very important to track and maintain the assets in order to eventually ensure that they get the better performance and utilization of those assets.
Well, Falgun, a follow-up question for you there, because some of the assets that you've described, they truly vary in terms of cost, in terms of availability, in terms of form factor. So I would imagine, as an outsider looking in, that there is no one-size-fits-all formula or technology to track their whereabouts.
Absolutely. So there are range of tracking technologies available, and you rightly said that there is no one size fits all use cases. So depending on various factors, we sit with the enterprise and design a solution, selecting the tracking technology which best suits them. Now, the factors that I was mentioning, one of the primary factors that we generally ask every enterprise is, what is the tracking objective?
Sure.
Right? The choice of the technology to a large extent depends on the objective of an enterprise in tracking those assets. Yeah?
Absolutely.
So some enterprises come to us and tell us that, hey, we just want to automate the asset inventory and audit function. So for them, we simply go with a QR or a passive, RFID technology, because they only want to automate the inventory. They don't need to invest on fancier technologies.
Right.
We also ask them, what's the mobility level of those assets? If the asset is very mobile, we generally ask them to go for a GPS or an RFID technology. If the asset is stationary, once fixed, it's not going to move that much, they can go for more passive technologies. Cost is another factor. So if the cost of asset is low, you don't want them to spend a lot on tracking infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Right? Frequency is another factor. How frequently do they want to get updated about their assets? If they want to get updated real time, then you need to go for active technologies, which is, say, active RFID, GPS, beacons. If they don't want real-time information and sporadic information is okay for them, then they can go for a QR or a passive technology. So the choice of technology depends on many factors.
Well, you touched on this just a short while ago, but how would you characterize not simply the affordability of current tracking infrastructure, but the accessibility of this asset tracking infrastructure?
Yes, Pooja. So a lot is changing in the industry. So various industry reports suggest that the industry is back to reach a market size of about 40 billion US dollars by 26-27.
Impressive.
A lot of interest and investment is happening in the industry because of the growth that it is seeing right now. This interest and investment is largely on the hardware side, on the tags and readers and other infrastructure with respect to tracking.
Sure.
Because of that, the prices of these tags readers have gone down considerably, right? Which has increased the affordability of tracking infrastructure for businesses.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing that is happening is there is more maturity in the industry. Technology use cases are getting more standardized. So, customers come to us with a lot of research and they tell us that, they know how this technology works, what is their problem and which technology should be implemented for this problem. So with this kind of an understanding, the success rate have increased.
Sure.
Right? So these points put together, one, the R&D that's happening on readers and tags, and increasing maturity of the industry has resulted into the technologies becoming more affordable and more accessible.
Well, let me switch gears here a bit, because enterprises have now come to expect and in fact demand a more seamless approach to asset management. And what that now tells us is that no single tracking technology can be implemented in isolation. And that certainly seems to be an opportunity that AssetCues has taken advantage of. So tell us more about the solutions on offer.
Absolutely. So when we talk to the enterprise managers, Pooja, the first thing they tell us is that they don't want any solution which works in isolation, right? They want a solution which talks to the other system stack that they already have, right? What we have realized is in bits and pieces, they have some or the other process, available in one of those applications, right? So historically, the asset tracking application was implemented in isolation. But when we started building AssetCues, we always thought that this alone will not help any enterprise automate the entire asset management. Right. So we built it to be more interoperable and to be more scalable. All right. So I'll give you an example.
Please.
AssetCues has certified integrations with leading ERPs, including SAP. So whenever a customer comes to us, where we are going to implement AssetCues solution, our first suggestion is let's integrate AssetCues with your ERP.
Sure.
Right? Because you already have asset information available there, the purchase information available there. You don't need to reinvent the same process again in AssetCues. Right? So let the purchase and accounting be taken care of in your ERP. And we will take care of, AssetCues will take care of the tracking, the physical tracking, updation of condition, those attributes will be updated by AssetCues. So overall, you will have a landscape where you'll have complete information about an asset by data getting exchanged between two systems.
Sure.
Similarly, we have seen that there are enterprises who use ITSM tools, which is IT service management, or CMDB tools, to maintain and track their IT asset information.
Okay.
But this system does not talk to the ERP, right? So you have IT related information available in one system, finance related information available in other system, and there is no tracking of this information or no convergence of this information.
Right.
So when we implement AssetCues, we get the information of IT assets as is available in the ITSM or CMDB tools. We get finance information as is available in the ERP. We integrate them and update, the physical information there.
Sure.
So just imagine, any enterprise will have such a comprehensive information in one repository, right? So as I said, ERPs, their ITSM tools. We also integrate with HR tools, HRMS systems that the companies use. Because every employee gets allocated IT assets or mobile devices.
Absolutely.
Right? You rightly said that none of the enterprises want asset tracking system or technology to work in isolation. You need to understand what are the missing pieces, implement that much portion, and then integrate it with already whatever is already available.
Well, Falgun, walk me through how these solutions vary according to industry, because each industry, of course, has its own set of business challenges, which again then vary according to age and stage of company. And also tell me how these solutions vary according to the environment in which they are deployed and operate in.
The industry and the environment also needs to be considered.
Absolutely.
Because, let me give you an example. There is a company which operates in, say, a pharma industry.
Sure.
And this pharma facility is FDA approved.
Okay.
Now, the tracking infrastructure that you are going to implement there has to be compliant with FDA standards, right?
It must.
Yes. Similarly, there could be a company which is in oil and gas industry. Whatever tracking infrastructure is installed there has to be ATEX approved.
Right.
Right. So industry plays a role in determining which tracking technology is better. You asked about environment. So imagine a mining industry, right? You don't have boundaries or peripheries laid out at a mining site.
Not at all.
Right. So the solution that you implement there is not the same solution that you can implement in a plant or in an office.
Of course.
Right? So it has to be different. So depending on the industry and the environment that an asset operates in, we need to design the tracking solution accordingly.
Well, Falgun, how do you believe that this pandemic has influenced a typical enterprise's asset tracking needs?
So let me start with a very basic change that this pandemic has led us to. Most of the enterprises have put restrictions on how many people can attend office or warehouse or a plant on a daily basis.
Right.
Right. Now, with fewer people attending offices and plants, you need to increasingly rely on technology than people to learn about assets.
Sure.
You cannot have that luxury of having people tracking assets, right? So this is one big change that's happening. So companies have started thinking of newer technologies to track assets, right? Secondly, because the assets are diversified, they are not available centrally at a central location. Employees might be using some assets, some people might be working out of home and have assets there. So because the assets are decentralized, there is a need for a solution which can track these assets which are disparately available.
Absolutely.
That's another change that has happened. Then what pandemic has essentially done is it has accelerated the smart manufacturing practices, right? So as I said, with fewer people on shop floors, connected machines and predictive maintenance has become imperative, right?
Absolutely.
And again, so this was already a buzzword, manufacturing, smart manufacturing has
Very
always
much
been
so.
a buzzword even before pandemic hit
Right.
us. But what has happened is that it has now become a necessity. And with smart manufacturing, asset tracking is a natural outcome because you will have connected assets, right? So you don't need to do anything else to track those assets. Those assets are already tracked and you have real-time information of those assets. So that's one change that has happened. Secondly, when the employees are working out of their home and they are allocated assets, tracking of those assets become very important.
Right.
It's not just the cost of those assets which is at risk. There are cybersecurity risks involved as well, which needs to be considered.
Absolutely.
Right. So we are getting so many inquiries where companies are asking for newer ways to track the assets which are at employees' homes.
Sure.
Right. So that's one change that has happened. Lastly, because the supply chains have been disrupted so much, there is an increased impetus on utilizing the assets which are already available because you're not sure if you will get, the ordered assets in time.
Right.
Right? You will, first of all, get those assets themselves and then getting them in time. So that has increased, focus on utilizing the existing assets much better. So yes, the pandemic has certainly impacted the way, every enterprise thinks about their assets, thinks about tracking those assets.
Well, for sake of my understanding, say the enterprise in question has assets spread out across multiple locations, and say that those assets themselves are then owned by separate legal entities as well, adding to the complexity. In such a scenario, are the asset tracking mechanisms centrally defined or distinct by geography?
So see, every global enterprise organization will have multiple countries, operations in multiple countries, and each of these operations will have assets, all right? So we work for a company which has got operations in about 150 countries, and they have assets everywhere.
Sure.
Yeah. So global leaders would always want to converge the practices and technologies implemented for asset tracking in these operations that they have.
Right.
But that's not that easily possible.
Right.
Yeah, they want to control the assets centrally. They want to get information of their assets and generate meaningful information out of those assets. But that's not easily possible. There are various reasons for that. So if I tell you there isn't a single vendor which provides asset tracking solutions globally. So even if an organization decides to implement a solution globally, there isn't a vendor available.
Got it.
Okay. Again, in case of acquisitions of companies or inorganic expansion, the acquired companies might have their own technologies, might have their own processes.
Right.
Changing them overnight is not easy, right? So because of these challenges, it becomes very difficult to have a consistent solution or one single solution for the entire organization across countries. So what happens is, generally these organizations define a broad level policy at the organization level, at the group level.
Sure.
And then within the framework of that policy, generally every local company, every local entity will create their own policy, will create their own solution, right? Which could be different. Company-wise or region-wise, which could be different.
Sure.
But yes, it meets the global policy which has been set out by the organization.
So, sir, if I'm understanding you correctly, the need of the hour in this space seems to be more comprehensive, perhaps more customized, and perhaps more integrated asset tracking solutions. So that said, how has all of this influenced investor appetite when it comes to deploying capital in this direction? If you could answer that question for me from the lens of a decision maker or a manager on site at one of your clients.
Right, right. So Pooja, if you look at asset tracking historically, so the driving factor always has been compliance and reporting, right?
Sure.
So there are some statutory regulations which make it mandatory for an enterprise to know where their assets are, what condition they are into, which location they are in, which user is using them, right? So there are statutory regulations.
Sure.
So the driver always has been ensuring compliance. However, recent times we have seen a change in the customer expectation. They no more are only expecting compliance from the asset tracking solution. They are expecting more than that.
Right.
So today we get to sit with the customers and they ask us whether your solution can help us improve asset utilization, whether it can help us improve asset performance, right?
Right.
So why is this change happening? If you go back a few decades, we'll find the answer. So the mix of the asset and the nature of the asset has changed significantly.
Sure.
In 1950s, the useful life of an asset was more than 20 years, okay? Which means useful life, right? It means the life for which the asset can be used for the desired purpose,
Sure.
right? So it used to be more than 20 years in 1950s. Today, it is less than 10 years,
Wow.
okay? So, and most of this reduction has happened in the last decade or two, right? Why is it so? Because technology evolution is much more frequent and disruptive these days. So any machine or asset that I have invested in goes, obsolete much faster than before.
Right.
Okay. So within that limited time frame, within that limited useful life that I have, I would want to make the best use of that asset. Right?
Absolutely.
So my objective is no more just compliance. The objective is now changing to increasing asset performance and utilization within that limited time frame. So you rightly said, there has been a change in the customer behavior. they are now more open to investing in asset tracking solutions. It's not just for the compliance purpose, it is for, far greater and bigger reasons than those.
So what seems to have started as a simple exercise of verifying an asset's existence or perhaps tracking its location has now become a much more sophisticated process of extending the asset's shelf life, its health, its overall performance. So given the market sentiment and investment scenario, how do you anticipate this sector evolving going forward, and how bullish are you on its future growth prospects?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I would love to answer that. The industry is in a very sweet spot right now, and what we are seeing is the beginning of a huge transformation. Already with the advent and growth of AI/ML, blockchain, and big data,
Sure.
and introduction of these technologies into asset tracking, there already was a boost in the asset tracking industry.
Sure.
But if you look at what's happening right now, it can change the future of asset tracking. So there is digital twin technology which is in the making, which essentially creates a digital copy of the asset, and you can analyze this digital copy to predict the downtime and predict failures.
Phenomenal.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is going to change asset tracking industry. Similarly, RFID is used in combination with drones to completely automate the physical verification and inventory activity, right? So this will also transform asset tracking. There is research happening on batteryless IoT.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So currently the biggest challenge in implementing IoT for asset tracking is the replacement of batteries.
Sure.
Imagine if that's not a problem anymore, right? It will give a huge boost to the industry.
Right.
So we are quite excited, Pooja, with where the industry is heading, and probably whatever is happening today will change the way we track assets in future.
Well, all of your optimism, sir, is very heartening to hear. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm sure your insights are of tremendous value to our viewers.
Thank you, Pooja. Appreciate that.
And with that, our special feature, Evolution and Future of Asset Tracking, in association with AssetCues, comes to a close. Thanks for watching.